Good afternoon. My name is Carla Klingner, and I'm speaking here today at the nation's capital on what is an incredibly special day, October 16th, 2020, as it is World Food Day, a call for global solidarity in conjunction with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. This is our time to reflect on how we grow, nourish, and sustain together as one, for our actions are our future. And so we have taken this time in the last several months to stop and reflect, to think about what we can do together in terms of how we join initiatives and how we can help facilitate for everyone to be an activist to how it is that we can band together and help solve our Feed the World challenges. In conjunction of that, we have worked as a private company, Palindromes Inc., that launched in 2018 with a very bold initiative and a portfolio of projects that was to drive local and diversified production, to help drive economic stability in rural communities, not only here in the United States, but around the world. In those last few years, we have been able to deploy innovative genetics that are natural in form, no gene editing, non-GMO focus in soybeans, cover crops, moving into corn, livestock, and so much more. It is during this time that we were able to meet some exciting people around the world that were able to join us in this effort to move together on how great minds can come into a room and help work on what is some of the world's most difficult challenges facing us. As a result, Palindromes, with the effort of Self Globe and U.S. Farms, decided that there was really strength in numbers to help hit the barriers and the challenges that we see in terms of how we address these Feed the World challenges. We launched the World Ecology Initiative and Alliance as a result of this coming together and unifying our efforts. As our bedrock of our cultures and heroes are our farmers and our workers and those that have been often left behind when it comes to profitability and safety and access to nutritious and safe food. Through this effort, we have set together a 7 set core principles of how it is that we will meet and address our Feed the World challenges. And those 7 principles are how we show fairness to farmers, how we bring localization and diversification into our production, how we approach this in a manner that is wellness for all, including the farmers, the workers, and our end consumers. That we're just not talking, that we're actually demonstrating that this is possible, that it is a moral effort, it is a sustainable effort, and that we can prove it out one region, one project, and one transformative area at a time. And that we do this keeping in mind the importance of social justice and equitable rights for all those that are participating in our food supply chain. And that this must be done in a balanced effort. For that, we ultimately have one Earth, and we need to approach this planet with a one Earth mentality. Because of those 7 principles, we then turned around and knew that we needed to address the challenges that our farmers, our workforce, and our consumers are adhering to on the ground, especially during these dark times since the COVID-19 pandemic has really exposed what is imbalanced and the weaknesses in our food supply chain. We do not need to produce more food to feed the world. In fact, our advancements over the last several decades have proven out that we in fact can produce enough yield to feed the growing population. The reality is 1/3 of our food supply is wasted each year. That is the arable equivalent land of the United States, Egypt, and India combined, not making it into the hands of those most in need. Furthermore, we have a nutrition security issue that goes beyond just a food insecurity issue, and that even in developed worlds such as the United States, with 70% of our youth struggling with obesity to a manner that they would not even qualify for our U.S. military admission standards, all the way to access of malnourishment on the other end of the spectrum where the children are not having access to food. Food deserts exist even in developed worlds. We have a high number of food deserts here in the United States that came to light when the schools shut down and people having to line up to get access to the foods that were often provided, and that meal a day often provided to our children, even here within the United States. This is not a small feat. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a change that's got to be transformative, and that there's got to be strength in the numbers. When we pulled our collective minds together to determine how we best address this, we took that leadership from the United Nations and those special rapporteurs and the innovators that started together back in 2015 on a principle that we call Agro-Ecology. It's a movement that has already received a lot of talk and discussion in government rooms across the globe, private industry boardrooms, and so on, as if in fact this really is the way that we can approach how we feed the world. The folks coming here together today and members that we will be announcing over the upcoming months that are joining us in this alliance and in this effort absolutely believe that agroecology is the moral way to address what our inequalities are in the world that are driving these discrepancies within our food system. The reality is that the movement and the sustainability and the regenerative agriculture and all of these exciting things that those activists that have come before us and continue to be activists are making the consumer and the general public aware of the importance has to start with the farmer and assisting the farmer in how we make those transformative practices happen and in a reality, not just in the developing world, but also in the developed world. And a farmer cannot think about how they address transformative practices in a manner that will meet these demands and be kind and fair to the planet and help feed and continue to feed the growing population if they're not getting paid fairly. And the reality of the situation is during COVID and the last few years of trade instabilities, even here at where we call home in the United States, our farmers have not been receiving a fair and equitable profit for what it is that they bring to the table without intervention of government market facilitation payments, subsidy payments, and other disaster relief programs, as opposed to allowing the farmer to receive those payments openly and fairly in the marketplace. Through these last several years, as our role as palindromes, when we were deploying these efforts, we saw really the inefficiencies, the inadequacy in the infrastructure, and the challenges of how we evolve from a yield-centric society founded in crop monocultures that have evolved during my lifetime, back to how we get farmers to produce a high-quality, nutrient-rich product, moving away from the commoditization of where we have evolved our food system and what it is that we need to do on the ground to accomplish that. It is going to take fair and honorable payments to the farmers in the forms of premiums and other private industries coming to the table to recognize that our farmers are carrying the greatest risk and receiving the littlest reward among that food supply chain. And that in fact there is plenty of profit margin spread in all of the private companies that are participating in this industry to be able to allocate some of those profits back to the farmers without having to rely on the governments to make up those differences in price discrepancies that they're not achieving in the marketplace. Furthermore, we have to look at how we address the need for localization and diversification in our food system. We have a very aggressive initiative that we had launched in Palindromes Inc. called the 50-55 initiative, which is how we achieve 50% of our production within 50 miles within 5 years. In the town that I call home, which is Unionville, Missouri, that is a real challenge because we don't have access to an urban market within 50 miles around any direction of where I grew up. However, if we take a balanced approach and how we help communities like where I am from that has seen a 25% reduction in population, that was most recently named the poorest town in the entire state of Missouri, even though confinement and commoditized and big ag industry is a huge influencer and player within that community. And the fact of the matter is it has had our schools, it has had our hospitals, and our community has suffered from the lack of profitability to our farmers, the lack of tax base to our producers, and the lack of direct market access that is there. These are the sorts of initiatives that we have to bring forth to communities like where I grew up, not just where I grew up, but other parts around the United States and other parts around the world. And I'm excited that after a bit, we will have guests from other places in the world talk about what they're doing to hit these to join in and hit the metrics that we believe the agroecology movement can bring forth. With that, we also have to diversify what our production is. It is necessary to maintain good soil health and to correct the wrongs of what we have done over the last several decades. It is necessary in terms of what we saw where people were scrambling to the shelves, unable to purchase basic needs and a price tag that they could actually afford. These are the things that we have to focus on together. That this has to be something that we do in terms of wellness for all. That we have to look at the type of product we're putting out and what that means in terms of the end consumer and overall public health, and how it is that we can make access to capital available so that these transformations can happen on the ground. And that we have to demonstrate that this is scientific, that there is the science that can support this type of agroecological movement in developing and developed nations alike. That we will research and educate and demonstrate and prove out one region, one project at a time, that this movement will be the transformative change that rebalances the need in our food system. That we will do it in a socially just manner, with balance, and with that one earth mentality. With that being said, it is truly my honor and privilege to get to come to you on this incredibly special day and introduce members of the founding alliance team, as well as farmers and scientists and bankers from around the world. And I will start by my introduction with the gentleman who is standing directly to my left, Mr. Russell Kramer, who is here today as a voice for the farmer to speak on what it means when we talk about what it is going to take to transform these systems and get into the point where we can have fairness to farmer. But before he starts talking, we're going to play a short video regarding how we're going to do it, and we believe that that is by empowering small. So sitting next to my left is Russell Kramer, who is going to speak with us here in a moment, as he is one of the co-founders and forming alliance members of the World Agroecology Alliance, which we are officially launching today in conjunction with this very special World Food Day. And we could not be more excited about the fact that we see this as a platform to recognize in a system that will treat the heroes of our food supply system fairly. The heroes as the farmers, the heroes as our workforce, the heroes in terms of those end consumers and the moms and dads and family members who are tirelessly working to provide food on the table. This is such an exciting day because this has been years in the making, where we have had the opportunity to be blessed enough to work around the United States and around the globe to find those other like-minded leaders. And as I mentioned previously, this is absolutely possible to feed the world in a manner that is humane, moral, and based on found sound scientific results that have been known for decades about what the damage has been that we were doing to the planet and what it is that we need to do to correct it. With that said, those principles again that we are going to continue to repeat throughout the launch today, which really is the essence of what defines agroecology and what is going to guide the World Agroecology Alliance to move this effort forward, is our fairness to the farmers, localization and diversification in our production practices, the fact that we believe in wellness for all, that we're going to demonstrate, as a number of our founders are from the Show Me State in Missouri, and we believe that we will prove to the world that in fact this type of movement will address the challenges that we face as one planet, that we will do it in a manner that is socially just, that we will ensure that this is a balanced system and do so under a one earth mentality. With that said, prior to Russ talking, we're going to introduce to you the way that we believe that we can accomplish this together. For our actions, our future will be defined when we actually embrace the concept of empowering small. With that said, please enjoy this video.
Throughout history, it's taken the most unlikely of small to think outside the square, unchained by societal norms. A phoenix rising from the sacred ashes when all seemed impossible, soaring above the haze, redefining its predecessor's reality. Defying all odds, staring down the opposition regardless of size and power, believing there's always a David within capable of defeating the Goliath. Digging deep inside with grit, an unwavering will to succeed with a bit of rebel heart and a colorful rogue spirit, putting faith over fear and living with a purpose. It is those with a renewed courage serving as a voice for the silenced with unwavering authenticity and integrity, shining its light of truth upon the wrongs that corrects the feed the world narratives. Igniting a movement across the globe, for sometimes what was once considered mighty falls. We say, why not us? Why not you? Another defining historical moment in time. How? The seed planted in our brain in the midst of the night during one of the darkest hours for humankind, that the vision came creeping. The how, the now. EMPOWERINGSMALL. Empowering. Farmers who are the proud and trusted stewards of the land. Communities who are craving local gatherings that seemed so long ago. Women who have the power to unite communities. Minorities whose perseverance have defied all obstacles. Workforce who sacrifice safety with little reward or recognition. Immigrants who for their children humbly endure what they must. And youth who understand that waiting until tomorrow is not an option. As it is the collective small that in turn empowers Mother Earth, whose cries are echoing the land, the depth of her pain, without borders, exposed through diseases and natural disasters, locust swarms, declining pollinators, poor soil productive health, shrinking land mass. Knowing no difference in race, gender, religion, or nationality, no political party lines. Feel the flame. Raise your unified voices and put your hands up, for the proverbial ceiling cannot hold us believing the impossible probable. It is our moment for the small in the world to become one, truly, authentically empowered. Our actions, our future, to grow, nourish, and sustain together. World Agroecology Alliance. The movement is calling you. Now is our time. Empowering small.
Russ, it is so exciting for you to have had the opportunity to make this drive into Washington, D.C. with us this week for this very important launch. And the reason that we wanted to start with you today in terms of being a farmer and a farmer who's been a longtime activist as it relates to your local, state, and national policies, that you've been a leader out in the forefront of how you drive value back to the farmer as being key to that community development. I can't even begin to do an introduction that would do the work that you've done over your career and lifetime that you built up to do it justice or honor, but I can't think of a more appropriate person to introduce today to talk about the principle of fairness to farmers and what that means for the Alliance and what we're going to do to accomplish that. So with that said, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Carla. It is indeed an honor to be here and be part of this so vitally important launch. It's groundbreaking, it's trailblazing, and it's something that's going to bring so much hope. And you know what? I have all the faith in the world that we can get this done. Not only can we get this done, but we've proven that this model can work. And I've always believed, even though we have challenges, that in the end, good prevails. And with the group that you've assembled and the principles that we put together and the marching orders that we have, I am so excited about working with people in this alliance to make it happen. You're right. I'm a fifth-generation farmer from a little town called Frankenstein. And growing up in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, I actually saw what a truly sustainable economy, how it really works. It's about people coming together. It's about people supporting. It's about opportunity for fair profits and prices so that farmers in turn and people in turn, they reinvest in Main Street and they help each other. I know that it can work. And I know we've kind of gone astray in the last 40 years, but I know that we can bring it back and make it better, and Mother Earth can survive. Farmers, I guess I feel that we're entrusted caretakers of the earth. The soil, the water, the plants, the animals, and even tending to our own communities. And I feel a deep responsibility there, and our farmers do. And you're right. I think that fairness to farmers, and starting off with the farmers, I'm privileged to say, and feel also responsible, that we're the ones that, if we can have fairness to farmers, that will set the stage, that will enable the other principles. It's kind of like, I'll use the old line from my favorite sports movie. If you build it, they will come. If we pay farmers and reward them fairly for the work that they do, they will provide this abundant, high-quality, local, diverse food supply, and which will enable us to pay good wages to our just wages for our workers. It'll enable a lot of innovation and research, at the same time protecting the natural resources that our Mother Earth has given to us, as well as helping sustain economies. I truly believe that. And fairness to farmers, we're not asking for, and we don't want to rely on a guarantee. We don't want to rely on subsidies. We don't want to rely on different approaches to different handouts or bailouts. What we do want is the opportunity to make a fair living, to feed our families, and to support our communities. And I feel that's just what this alliance can do for us. We've done some things like this in the past. Some of our allied partners already have put in place some projects that basically assure farmers an opportunity to make a living through the cost production model, and plus a fair return on investment. When we incentivize farmers like that, not only do we assure them a living, that they can stay in their communities, they can invite the young people to come back to their operations, but they can reinvest that money back into communities and have a good life. And it works. I've seen it work time and time again. We've also protected that whole sense of innovation and entrepreneurism, by allowing a farmer to get better, to improve his facilities, to be innovative about the facilities and the genetics we use. We've used that in our pork program system, and it works beautifully. And farmers feel that they have a purpose. They feel that it's their moral responsibility to abide by these principles, like the Ecology that you have listed. And I feel very, very proud of this. Farmers, by and large, they want to get off this commodity treadmill. That commodity treadmill is that they seem to be be getting the signal to get larger and to expand and to buy more of the county and to have higher yields by buying more of these commercial inputs. And in the end, they see that their profits become, they dwindle. Razor thin margins, make them, are forced to do more. They don't want to do that. They would rather do quality. And they'd rather provide something that the consumers throughout the world actually want. And I'm afraid that we've gone down the direction that we're producing commodities and products that the world really doesn't want, and we need to change that. And I feel that the Alliance will be able to do that. It's not been a rosy ride here the last 40 years. We've had a lot of challenges in agriculture and in turn foods. I told you about the depressed prices, the erratic nature of the markets, the volatility, the insecurity that even takes a lot of confidence away, by the banker. And ironically, in the heartland, we see places that are the most impoverished and have the worst child well-being rankings, and that's unfortunate, and that shouldn't be, and we're going to change that. I've even had my issues with my challenges, with low prices. Especially I've seen this here during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've seen a lot of weaknesses in our food system. Here a while back, I had sold my prized Hamworth boar for, weighed 585 pounds, 1 cent per pound. I didn't even have enough money to buy a six-pack of my favorite beverage. At the same time, about a week later, I went to dined at a pizzeria in rural Iowa, and the sign boldly stated that due to the increases in our input prices, our raw meat supply, that we're going to have to raise pizza prices. And notice that the pizza prices for the meat lover pizza was additional $2. We're going to change that. And one of the things that we're going to do is introduce a program of authenticity. I learned when I studied in Europe for a brief amount of time about what they were doing and treating farmers like rock stars and treating them with respect, that relationships are probably one of the last hurrahs and last frontiers that family farmers can hang their hat on. We know that consumers want that relationship, and when I learned about relationship marketing over there, it was about consumers that wanted to know who produced their food, where it was produced, and how it was produced. And we're going to do that. We're going to reveal, we're going to be transparent, we're going to build that relationship. We're going to establish a seal that can complement some of our other partners, what their efforts are. But we're going to provide that authenticity and provide a product that our consumers can rely on. I'll close by saying that I feel confident that we will get this done. And authenticity and transparency will help us grow, nourish, and sustain the world together. And you have my commitment on that.
Thank you so much, Russ, for the time that you have put in to pave the way for something like this to be possible through your years of advocacy and taking the risk that you have taken to lead the way here in the United States in terms of breaking down those barriers between farmers and consumers and helping directly connect those markets. And you always have a number of inspirational stories that makes this alliance all the more important. But I've recently shared that boar story with a number of folks that during COVID, when our consumers, our people, our families, not just here in the United States, but around the world, were vying to find those base needs and those staple products to stockpile because it was such a scary and uncertain time. When we started those initial stay-at-home orders, and then to turn around and see the farmers dumping the milk and dumping the commodities and not having a place to take the animals and not knowing how to handle the euthanization on the farm. And then when I heard your story about the boar, where you didn't even get enough to cover the cost of transportation, a penny a pound, while at the same time those input costs being passed on to the consumer's shelf at record-breaking prices. To me, that is not a food supply issue. It is not anything that the farmers did wrong. It was not the unwillingness of the workforce to go to the lines, out on the front lines, putting their life and their families' health and safety and well-being on the line for the betterment of society and the community to ensure that they had that product. But then that product either not getting there, or when it was there, getting there at a price that was just not affordable for the common family, for the common household in this country and around the world. To me, if that was not a cry for how truly broken our food system is, I think that was probably, I think would be fair to say, probably the defining moment of knowing that this alliance had to launch. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Yeah.
It was time.
Yeah. And the seal of authenticity and transparency that we can launch around the world to ensure that food that is being produced and companies that are out there doing, doing the work with the farmers and the consumers, that they're held to a higher standard of what that means for the betterment of society around the world, and that putting this third-party audit system out there to ensure that all of these principles are being met. And that is what is ultimately getting on the shelf, I think, is one of the most exciting initiatives that we'll be bringing forth. So thank you for the introduction of that.
You're right. Thank you for the opportunity.
And so if you will bear with me a moment so I can get my headset on, we're going to be moving into some folks that we have joining us virtually on what we've all become very familiar with, which is how we balance life, family, and Zoom all in the same room. And so I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, who is going to be speaking on the importance of localization and diversification in terms of what it means for our soil health and community vitality, and the ability to bring forth opportunity that will succession the land and the farming practice to the next generation. And that is TJ Carlos, who's going to be joining us in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, who has been actively for the last hour going back and forth between Zoom and unloading trucks for the next cover crop deliveries that have been coming in, that he will talk about the role of how important that is and what that can do to sustain farms and sustain our soils. I had the opportunity to meet TJ in our more recent journey, and on the private industry side, we have been working very closely with TJ and BioTill on how we expand those acres of cover crops throughout the Midwest. And I just have rarely come across such a dynamic and passionate and enthusiastic speaker and leader and father and mentor to his sons. And so with that said, I'm going to pass this over to TJ.
Thank you, Carla. I really appreciate that introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with the launch of this great alliance. Yes, once again, I'm TJ Carlos. I'm here in beautiful southern Minnesota, watching the snowflakes come down. So, we always say, if you don't like the weather in Minnesota, hang around 5 minutes, it'll change. And it might not change for the better, but it will change. So we've had some flakes, and we've had some rain, and we've had some sunny weather. So we've had it all this fall. So the beauty of that is we're getting harvest along real fast this year. We're moving along real quick. So we've got a lot of cover crops going in. And a little bit of history of myself and my company is I grew up here in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota. If you don't know what Blooming Prairie is famous for, it's not just booze and prairie. Back in the Prohibition days, we're the home of the Awesome Blossoms. That's our sports mascot. We're the third best known mascot in the world. And we're right behind the Fighting Fairies, which I don't know how they form a football team, because beyond me, how anybody will play those guys is just, that's out of my realm. We are very proud of our team. Very proud of those boys and how hard they work. So, with that being said, several years ago, I got the opportunity to go to work for Saddle Butte Ag out of Shed, Oregon. It's right in the Willamette Valley, and really start promoting cover crops just as my sole business. So I don't sell corn, soybeans, anything else. I just sell cover crops. I grew up on the family farm. We were very innovative on bringing on new ideas, chisel plows. We went to ridge till, we went to no-till, went to cover crops. We've added third crop in our rotation. We've done a lot of ththings that most of our neighborhood thinks were nuts, and we like that. I went to work for Saddle Butte. They have the same mentality of their company is they're 100% no-till out in the Willamette Valley, which is not heard of in their world. It's very, very heavy tillage, and they're doing 100% no-till. do not remove their straw. They leave their straw loads on to help with residue, worm feeding, biology feeding. So with that being said, it's a family organization there. It's a family organization here, and we're all a big family. And that's the part I love about it is I can call the president at 9 o'clock at night out there, and she and I can have a great conversation about politics and our kids and our families, and then we can talk business on top of it. So that I think that's a big part of bringing all this together is that we work together as a family, as a team. The soil health side of it has been really interesting and great to work with because we're showing that we can get away from as much herbicide as we can, starting to manage our fertilizer better, manage our soils better, manage our inputs better to make us more profitable. And the only way my boys ever get to be on the farm is we have to manage our inputs better and require and get a fair wage for our products that we produce. So that's why I was really excited to start working with Carla and Russ on the soybean side of it to see that there's some premiums and we're going to be treated fairly on those premiums. I think that's outstanding. But the other part of it is the soil health factor that having a hyaluronic soybean and be able to plant them maybe a little bit later and utilize the covers in the spring and the fall better for us for weed management and reducing the herbicide, reducing the nitrogen, reducing the fertilizer use is going to be great. So it all starts to tie together. And I like Russ when he threw the analogy, and I'll throw one of mine in that I've really started to use with producers a lot is, you go by a farm and what do you see? You see grain bins, you see sheds, you see a house with a garage. So you put your crop in a bin to protect it because it's valuable. You put your machinery back in a shed because it's very valuable to you. You paid a lot of money for it. You pick up your cars in garages. Most people do, some don't, but that's their call. But you take care of them. You put a roof over your house. And the soil, the start of all of it, we leave bare, naked, starving, burning, freezing 80% of the year. And then we kickstart in the spring and say, grow me a crop. And in the fall, I'm going to let you die. And in the spring, I'm going to revive you. And I looked at the months of time that we have to grow another crop, put carbon in the soil, sequester nitrogen and phosphorus from the water source. All those things are great positive, and it helps everybody down the stream. Where I live in Minnesota is the headwaters of the Cedar, and it's the headwaters of the Mississippi's north of us. So I can walk across these bodies of water where they start here. So we start a lot of the issues here of what we got going on. And we have to maintain our soil. The soil has to stay in the field. The nitrate has to stay in the field. The phosphorus has to stay in the field where it belongs. The Gulf doesn't want it. The people down in Des Moines don't want it. Nobody wants our excess. We need to keep it here. And the only way to do that is to promote soil health, reduce tillage as much as physically possible. Some areas, when we start guys out, strip till is still an option, no till beans, but always have the cover crop spring and fall growing, scavenging, taking in that energy from the sunlight, putting it into the soil, putting carbon in the soil. All those can help mediate weather issues that we have and keep everything where it belongs. I'm a great neighbor, but I really don't believe in giving my neighbor soil. I don't believe in giving him fertilizer. I don't believe he can buy his own. That's his call. And the nice part about coming on and working with this company is they're trying to work on ways to start bringing the next round of people onto the farm, bringing my boys into the operation of the soil health side of it with the cover crop business and the farming side of it, and be able to pay them a premium to do the crops that we're going to raise and be able to utilize the covers to reduce the use of herbicides, reduce tillage. I'm not saying you're not going to get by never using these things. I'm not saying that. I'm not anti-herbicide, don't get me wrong. It's a tool in the toolbox. If we use it correctly, it's not an issue. If we abuse the snot out of it, it's going to be a problem. If we dump too much fertilizer on it, it's going to be a problem. So as we learn to mimic Mother Nature, just think about it. We have been on the prairie. My ancestors came to this area in 1878. Prior to that, the indigenous people were here. They took care of the prairie way before we got here. They didn't have tractors, they didn't have big tillage tools, but they took care of it. We have to go back to doing that, taking care of it. Now, you got to raise a crop, you got to be profitable. I'm not saying those things, but you have to be able to maintain the soil health side of it, because that's where the benefits are going to be as we maintain the soil health. Insurance has looked at these things, they've started to really notice them, where you're using cover crops, where we're reducing tillage, where we're doing all these things, they're not making the payments, even during the weather events. Now, that Dorico that went through Iowa, I can't stop the wind from tearing corn out. I'm sorry, can't stop that with covers. But I can protect it from pounding rainstorms. I can protect your soil from a lot of things with the cover crops. As we do that, as the soil health increase, our profitability will increase on the farm. And that has to be the bottom line, is our profitability has to increase. I just sat through a webinar that said we have 50 to 60 years of topsoil left in most areas in the Midwest. Well, I'm 52. I probably won't see the end of that, but I just had my grandkids here in the office 10 minutes ago, and I had my son here. They will see the end of it if we don't do something. We just need to make changes, and we can do that and not economically hurt ourselves. We can economically help ourselves, help the environment, and help everybody. We can help with climate change this way. These all tied together. Mother Earth, the start of everything, the start of your operation, the most valuable asset you own, just have to take care of it. You take care of her, the rest of this really comes along fairly easily. But you got to take care of the soil. We got to start doing new practices. And they're not new practices. They're very old practices. We're just bringing them back. I like the regenerative idea, not the sustainable. Sustainable means you do the same thing over and over again and keep it going. I like the regenerative idea. I like we're trying to rejuvenate this. These are a lot of old practices. And I think Bob and some of the other ones will talk about this, about how these practices were done years ago. We're bringing them back. But you got to know what you're doing, how to handle it, how to terminate it, how to work with it so it doesn't hurt your cash crop, doesn't hurt your profitability. So once again, I'm really excited being here. I know I went over my time a little bit, Carla, but you put a quarter in me, shut me down. So I really appreciate the great opportunity. I've worked with Palindrome. You and Russ have been great people to work with. I'm really excited about this. So like I said, I'm really happy to be here on the launch of this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, TJ. Just to follow up on a few points that I think are so significant that you brought up, that ties right into an initiative on how we keep this local and how we keep this diverse. That you had mentioned your family has been on the land in Minnesota since 1878, and that your sons and your grandchildren were just in the office with you, because I know you're actively unloading seed. It's time to be getting these cover crops in the ground as the soybeans and corn are coming off the field. And so I know you have really been pressed for time today and really took the time away to come here. But over the last few months, we've spent time talking about what it's going to take to keep your sons on the land and your grandchildren on the land, besides just addressing the soil health issues. And that's really tied to access to capital, which is why we're excited to talk about the fact that one of the initiatives with the Alliance is going to be putting together a land fund. And TJ, I think you can give a kind of nod as you're still on the screen here. Yes, that your children and your boys, whom I've had the opportunity to spend time with in the seed house in Minnesota and see how hard they work and how committed they are to that community, they need the hand to be able to make sure that that transition can occur. Isn't that fair?
Yes, absolutely, Carl. And that's the biggest thing. In fact, I just met with a investment banker on Wednesday night, and that was our conversation is, we can borrow money to buy machinery, we can borrow money to buy seed, we can borrow money to do just about everything, but it's the acquisition of the land. And what's happened, the tough part of the whole thing is, as we go out and start bidding on rent contracts, we have to bid $250, $2.25 to be able to rent land. Or if we're purchasing land, you're talking a major capital investment. You go to your normal bank, and I'm sure Michael will talk about this. You go to your normal bank and say, I want to buy this $8,000 piece of land. They look and go, good luck. Yeah. Because $8,000 an acre land does not cash flow in the current situation. And it's a leap of faith for them. So access to capital is huge. Access to capital is huge on that side, Carla. And then the other part you and I have talked about is in the cover crop business. Boots in the ground, applying these covers, mixing the seed, the warehouses. That is a huge investment. And that's one thing else you take to the local bank. Great guys. I work with our local bankers all, but boy, it's a leap of faith for them to let me buy pickups and tenders and no-till drills and tractors and all that stuff, because, well, maybe one year I'll keep them busy 20 hours or 20 days out of the week or the month. Maybe the next will be 5. Yes. So it's really, but the more equipment we have and the more boots in the ground we have, the more we get done. What we're doing this afternoon is we're tending drills running south of here right now that are drilling after the soybeans and corn are coming off. And it's a couple of guys that I got started, and they're going like wildfire with it.
Absolutely. And you couldn't have done a better lead in with that answer into our next speaker. So thank you, TJ. I won't keep you on Zoom any longer because I know you've got to get back to that truck, but we appreciate the time today and can give your boys the assurance that this alliance is committed to putting together the funds that will keep the land in ownership and at work with local owners in those local communities. That is one of the calls to action that we're focused on. So thanks for the time today. And as I mentioned, TJ did a wonderful job leading into our next speaker, which I could not be more hesitant / excited to introduce, as it is my brother, Mike Klingner, who's going to be talking with us from Williamsburg, Iowa today on what it means to be well for all and how that plays a role in terms of local lending and access to capital. And I didn't do much about talking about my own background, but I did grow up on a diversified family farm operation with 3 siblings. 3 of my siblings are still actively involved. The other 3 are actively involved in that diversified and cow-calf operation where my brother Mike and sister Carrie have really taken the lead to carry on that family legacy and generation. And I always joke, Mike, that why I ended up having to go to law school and do all this other policy work really led to a defining moment in our childhood when we were showing livestock together at the Missouri State Fair, which our older sister had put some pretty big shoes to fill in the sense that she was quite a winner in the show ring. And so she had aged out and could no longer show, and it was my turn. So I thought to take the reins and hopefully bring home the grand champion title to the family and hang my sign in the barn next to my sisters. And I ended up being selected as the grand champion steer on the FFA division, and my brother Mike was the grand champion steer on the 4-H division. So in the big arena at the Missouri State Fair, we're down to the final minutes, and it was between he and I who's going to bring home that honor. And much to my surprise, the judge picked my brother Mike. And so afterwards, when we were interviewed on the radio, I got asked, why would I let my little brother carry that honor and beat me in the show ring? And I said, well, until about 5 minutes ago, I thought I was the one that had the best animal. And I think that was the moment where I realized I was probably not the one to be running the cow-calf operation. And so with that said, I'm going to turn this over to my younger, good steward and farmer / banker brother, Mike Klingner.
So can you guys hear me on your end?
We can hear you great. Thanks for taking the time to get online with us today, Mike.
Perfect. Excited to be here. And I tell you what, I still have that championship photo that sits in my bank office today. Still pretty proud of that. And speaking of football and sports, since I'm such a huge fan, I mean, following up TJ with that inspiration, it makes me just want to go run out of the tunnel. Pretty inspirational in the stuff that they're doing with the cover crops and exciting and great lead in to follow that. So with that being said, I'm pretty passionate about ag lending and small communities coming from one. Just a little background on me. I have a little over 20 years of ag lending experience. Worked at a small local bank there in Unionville, Missouri for close to 20 years. And last year took a leap of faith and kind of downsized on my own farming operation. So I kind of know what those farmers are going through because I ran a lot of cow-calf pairs during that time, volatility there the past 4 or 5 years, and made a leap of faith and came up to Farmers Trust and Savings Bank here in Williamsburg, Iowa, a small local bank in a great community here on the eastern edge of Iowa. Still a lot of guys that feed a lot of cattle, a lot of corn and soybean area, kind of a great place to grow. But with that being said, following up on some of TJ's stuff, we are facing lots of challenges the ag industry. And Carla only gave me, I think, 7 minutes to speak. And to follow that up, I mean, uh, as you can tell, Carla liked to speak, so I didn't really get to say much until I was 4 or 5 years old. So I'm going to take advantage of these full 7 minutes here. So, um, but what we're seeing is it is taking large amounts of capital um, for these small to middle-sized producers, and of course your large producers too. But those small and middle-sized producers have really been feeling the squeeze. We moved into like what we talked a lot about today, where everything is in 13 and 14. We got to produce more, produce more, produce more, the old ag mentality, and then unfortunately, as we produce more, we all see, what kind of happens to commodity prices at that time. They all go lower. One thing that farmers are always good at, and we know that from the banking standpoint, is farmers want to produce, and they're good at producing, no doubt about that. But during that time, we've lost balance. Kind of like what TJ's saying about the soil health, going back to what Russ was talking about, to how things used to be, how we used to do some things in agriculture. And part of that is we went through a time where we've really, really kind of have fallen off balance. I visited with my sister here earlier today, talking about getting prepared for this. And the best way to put it is we are kind of what we'd call top heavy right now on the ag side, where we've really lost sight and we've really lost sight of that competition because we are so top heavy in ag. Like I told my producers, follow the dollars, whether they're local, whether they're going out locally to your state, where are those dollars going? And unfortunately, we need a lot of these big companies, and a lot of them do a lot of great things. But with that, they unfortunately control a lot of these input costs that's going into these things. And we're losing a lot of money out of these rural communities by a few of these companies that are controlling these inputs. And we got to get some balance back into this, which is a great thing, that this company is working and its launch is going to, is to kind of maybe level that playing field and get that balance back a little bit. So on my side, when we really started to see some losses really starting to creep up on the ag side in 2014 and 15, when we were coming out of that great high price super cycle, we just started to see a lot of volatility. And with that volatility, the unfortunate thing is with being so top heavy, my producers were losing massive amounts of money. Mm-hmm. And I know many of you are probably shaking your head saying, oh, that happens. Well, when that happens, we all know what goes on. And a banker's mindset, they're sitting there thinking, okay, what do we do with these losses? Well, unfortunately, we have to shift them down the balance sheet and spread them out for people. And we were seeing short-term losses, like in a 6-month cycle or a 1-year cycle. We were having to shift those all the way to against their land, creating 20 and 30-year mortgage payments for these guys that they used to not have to have because of these massive losses. Well, we all know what that does. That creates another payment. So, and they had already bought machinery and stuff to expand their operations during those times, and it creates tight cash flows. So, I've learned a lot more, unfortunately, from my failures and success, and seeing how that happens. But when you create those long-term payments, they don't go away. Mm-hmm. So, cash flow becomes a major, major important topic, and which what TJ played on is soil health and the things that he can do with these cover crops, and opportunity that we all want to bring our family back in. I have 4 kids myself, and my wife worked in as the public health administrator in the local health department. And you even see when those money is sucked out of these rural economies, and it doesn't become any sustainable, and these cash flows get weak. I mean, we were looking at stuff there in our own local communities where you have 50 and 60% of your kids on even free and reduced lunches, just because we don't even have good health care, good jobs, and different things in these local communities. And that's something we need to be mindful of, to produce a quality food that has access to these people, and main key that we were all talking about, that's something that's affordable for them too, while still getting these farmers paid. Mm-hmm. So I think if we get this reshift of the balance, and we get away from relying on some of these government payments, Um, when we have a player coming in the marketplace and maybe what this company's trying to do and what this launch is really trying to do, if we can shift some of that power back to these producers, these local economies, um, it really makes a job for a local banker a lot easier when you're seeing some of these cash flows kind of having something that's maybe a little more solid and sustainable, as opposed to kind of the hope and pray model that we're hoping and praying for these higher prices, or if the prices aren't high, you're hoping that you make these great yields. And I know Russ hit on the commodity cycle. We kind of feel like a hamster on a wheel. And I know us bankers a lot the last 4 or 5 years, you feel like you can't get off that cycle or wheel. And we know it's time we need to reshift that balance. So if we get off that top heavy mindset and we start relying on that, we can really start providing some quality products out there that we're producing, and keep some of that money local and recycle that. And it makes that credit so much easier, for those borrowers to obtain, and the cash flows are better, and it sure makes those bankers a lot happier too at the end of the day, to where trying to get everybody profitable. So super excited about the system and what it brings, and the balance that it brings, and kind of getting away to where these farmers are having access their seed companies for credit, their fertilizer companies for credit, their local banks for credit. They just have to go so many areas to spread that, out. And then at the end of the day, there's just not enough money to go around when, when these crops start bringing enough money for them. And I'm just super excited about what this allows us to do, and makes our job a lot easier.
Well, I appreciate you weighing in from not just a farmer perspective, but, a few decades into working on the ag lending side. And as we talked leading up to today's launch, and you mentioned in your talking points that your wife was the head of the county health department and has built a career in public health, which is what she does at the University of Iowa now. And when we sat down to that dinner table at a family discussion, we end up getting in some really back and forth exchanges of what that food system really looks like, not just from the farmer perspective, but what it means for community development and lending and access to capital, all the way through what that looks like in terms of what your wife's dealing with on a regular basis in terms of public health and rural community public health. And some of the statistics I cited earlier in terms of challenges with access to affordable food deserts here, even in the United States, and the need for that assistance especially was heightened during COVID, and just on and on. And it goes back to, as you and Russ both coined it, how do we allow a system to provide an avenue for these communities and the farmers to get off that wheel of dependency on the big that makes that cash flow really difficult. I had a farmer that I had recently had lunch with in Indiana, and he was saying, each year that's gone by in the last few years, they're just they're just hitting that cash flow by going deeper into the balance sheet. And I think as a banker, it's fair to say you're seeing more of that, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's one thing that is a slippery slope for us bankers. We hate taking those short-term losses and shifting them all the way down the balance sheet, oftentimes even into that real estate, to create long-term payments for these people. It's just not a sustainable model. When we've all talked about how volatile the markets are, when you go to creating a debt payment out there that's for 20 or 30 years, just because of a short-term loss, that's not a very sustainable model as far as trying to keep these guys cash flow and keep that debt away. Especially, we want to avoid that as much as possible to allow them more flexibility to where we can bring on that next generation.
Yes.
And we've got to get that corrected, where I have some, am a little fearful that where we can't bring on that next generation to continue some of those.
Well, definitely that hits a spot with us, as you mentioned, your 4 children and my lovely nieces and nephews who take the passion of agriculture quite seriously. Thank you for the time. I think this really leads into one of the initiatives that the Alliance will be taking forth is to put together a micro loan fund to work hand in hand with local rural community banks, like the bank where my brother Mike is currently serving and the bank where he was previously serving in our hometown. Because farmers need to have access and small agribusiness leaders need to have access to that operational capital that is so hard to come by now as you're dipping into that equity and that net worth more and more. So Mike, thanks for the time. I know you've got to get back to the bank, and so we'll let you go here today, and we look forward to continuing to brainstorm on how we work with the rural lending community as we put these funds together.
Thank you.
So moving on to our next speaker and kind of keeping it in the family again, we had Russ Kramer speaking earlier about the fairness to farmers. And through my work and opportunity to get to know Russ and some of his family, I had a really, really high privilege of meeting whom I already knew by name and research and studies, his brother Robert Kramer, who was a leading soil scientist for the USDA ARS and has recently retired but continued his passion and love for the soil in becoming a professor of microbiology at the University of Missouri. And I had to get a chuckle in preparation for the lunch and having Russ reach out to his brother to see if he could talk to us about how agroecology can work and that the science is there to support this sort of initiative, is that he had shown me a clip or cartoon, Robert, that you had received from the family of a gentleman sitting lonely on a park bench. And the caption read something along the lines of, "This is what it looks like when you're at a party and you're a soil scientist." So there was no one around to socialize and engage with you. And I used to always tell Russ, he's the old Barbara Mandrell song of country when country wasn't cool. But I think I used that line incorrectly on the wrong brother, because there is no doubt the work that you have done and the career that you have led is probably the coolest thing that people are talking about at parties now, which is soil health and the role that soils play in planetary health, animal health, and even gut health for humans. And so thank you for taking the time to be here with us today to talk about the importance and role of research and demonstrating what's possible when you treat your soils kindly.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Carla, for inviting me to be here. And yeah, it can be pretty lonely when you're the only one at a party that knows anything about agriculture. But I will say that this is probably the only place in the world right now where there's 2 guys from Frankenstein on the panel.
It was overdue.
So yeah, I grew up on the same farm that Russell did, and my career path took a little bit different, a different direction. I did have 30-some years with the USDA Agricultural Research Service as a microbiologist, and was also an adjunct faculty at the University of Missouri, which is a little bit unusual to have those 2 unique positions together. But I've seen over the years how science has evolved from a government standpoint. Early on it was very, here's your project, go after it and write it up and report it. And that really evolved over the years to where we got this political correctness thing now that really made research very difficult to conduct near the end of my tenure in the mid 2000 team there. So I don't know. When I look at this title, I'm looking at the unbiased science review, and And the unbiased really sticks out because ideally the end product of scientific research is to ultimately come up with um, management practices, services, and products is going to be adopted or at least be considered by the user out there, the farmers. And it's sometimes very difficult to get the proper information out there. By the time these things are distilled down to extension guides or farm magazine articles. And I think these days, a lot of farmers are getting their information from, um, industry dealers. Well, obviously there's a bias right there. They're going to try to sell their seed and their fertilizer. So, but that seems to be part of the times now, is that because universities cut back on their extension personnel and even their basic researchers, some of that information is hard to come by, and that's where farmers have to go as a last resort is what their dealers are doing, and some of them are good and some are not so good. So that's the kind of thing that has to be considered. But when we think about ag science, really it's only about 150 years old. I think last year, or I guess it's this year, the College of Agriculture at Missouri celebrated its 150th anniversary since it was established. And one of the things that's made science kind of difficult to interpret was it was only about 70 or in the 30s when statistics were finally applied to science, where you could really see, can we prove that there's a difference in some of these practices that we're looking at in the field. So for an example, the Sanborn field here at Missouri, which is an experimental trial, was established in 1889. Well, there weren't any statistics, and so guess what? Each treatment is one lot. There's no there's no replication. So it's real difficult to come up with, when you're looking at repeated measures, to say, oh yeah, the effects here are truly real, because of that kind of thing. So over really not until about about 19 in the 60s and 70s, when we were able to put these tools in science, is when we finally got to the point where we could report results of agricultural experiments and show that they're repeatable and reproducible, that could really take the bias out of science. And even still now, we still have the problem with bias, because when a project, it doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter whether it's on cover crops or genetic evaluation of new cultivars or whatever, it still has to go through a review process. And if hopefully the researcher is unbiased when he does this, but then it has to go through a level of peer evaluation by their peers, so that it is acceptable, and really maybe make the reporting much more effective. Many times, in the early days, there were some biases that if you were not from a very high class institution, say like Penn State or MIT or something, you could have a bias against your affiliation. I don't think that's so much a problem anymore. What some of the problems now are is that affirm the integrity of research, regardless of who did it, and avoiding conflicts of interest. So here, again, looking at let's say the university, at one time we had many people on staff that covered almost every aspect of production agriculture. Now, it's greasing the wheels is molecular biology, genetic engineering, and that goes not only for plants but for animals as well. And so, the actual management in the field, the soil management, being husbandry or animal husbandry is not as uh, well funded anymore because they really don't have a commodity to support that. Like soybean genetics and corn and all that. So that's been a real challenge. We've seen our faculty slim down to maybe 25% of what it was 30 years ago. So there's a lot of challenges here with that. So I wasn't going to get into any specific area because this is such a broad topic, but I did want to kind of finish up just to consider that when we do research, do the science, we kind of look at it in what is the setting. A lot of things where the genes are moved around in the lab may not have any relevance to what is happening in the field. So field research is very important. What is the context? Do these some of the assumptions that can be based on our conclusions can be based on assumptions because of the subset of the experimental conditions. So in other words, if we're doing soil health on a particular soil association in mid-Missouri, that's not going to translate to what you have in northern Iowa. Just because you think about it, but often that's missed. There's a lot of things that are being done in one part of the country that is assumed can be translated to another. So that's a very critical bias right there. Also, and I ran into this, is sometimes depending on who the researcher is employed with will influence what is released into the information stream. I've already mentioned about academia where if you're being supported by, say, big fertilizer or big ag chemical, your research better not show something that is not very palatable to them. So that's a problem in government work that we did. For a while, it was very wide open, but then as we got into this whole political correctness business in the early 2000s, and if you were working on something they considered was very sensitive or priority, such as transgenics or antibiotics, climate change is a very popular one right now, they almost controlled what you could do and how you would write it up. Sometimes it would go through a review of 3 different people, all the way from the local level in Columbia all the way to Beltsville to the secretary's office before they would release it. Because if they found something that would offend one of their supporters, or for instance, one of the very many that I got caught with was with I did a study of sod versus no-till, and I found that the biology of the sod soil was much improved over no-till. Well, they told me, we really can't say that because we might offend our no-tillers, and something silly like that. But these are the types of things that happen. In reality, some of the farmers' work that is guided by some associations like the Practical Farmers of Iowa is very good, and it's more non-biased, I would say, than what we see from universities and even the government. Wow. But saying that, I know I'm running out of time, Carl, but I'll wrap this up. Let's look at soil health. Soil health is very high interest now. There's a soil health interest that is regionalized across many government agencies, but at the same time, there's a soil health partnership doing similar things. However, it's supported by the national corn growers, it's supported by Bayer, and it's supported by these industries that want to show that they're really supporting regenerative and soil health and cover cropping. So these are the kinds of things that are going. It kind of gives you an idea of the state of the art, and I'll just stop it with that.
You know, Bob, I need to call you Dr. Kramer because that is truly what your title should warrant. And I shouldn't refer to you in such a personal capacity, but you're so modest and humble with what your career and journey and contributions have been over the years. And I'm always just blown away. And we could do an entire conference just centered around you. And I mean, the number of times I've been around the world in meetings with your brother, and they look at his last name and then quickly connect the dots and realize he's related to you. And it's just the whole tone of the meeting changes because your work is truly world renowned and relied upon in so many places. And so thank you for all you've done. You know, I highlight a few of the points that you brought up in terms of how to approach what was really a sticky topic I threw at you with almost no advance warning and didn't even talk to you prior to today. So you really just ran with it. But that is, you know, the conflicts of interest that are centered around funding and how research is funded and what that means in terms of what research actually makes it into the hands of those that need it the most, which are our policymakers and our producers and those that are on the ground having to make decisions. And my big takeaway of what you said is just applied science. I mean, a very elementary principle that we maybe haven't focused on enough. And I think that that's one of the exciting things that the Alliance is going to be doing is raising funds to put together the research, education, and demonstration arm in a manner that is truly field applicable and applied to determine what works in Iowa may not work in Minnesota and most certainly may not work in Italy and India, which is where we've got a couple other speakers joining us from today. So, you know, I hope you keep your email and lines open to us going forward because I have no doubt we will want to do a conference just on the science tied to all of this. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks for sharing your wealth of wisdom in a short window of time about the importance of applied science and getting this information out there in a manner that really is unedited, I guess is the simple word I would use.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, well, to move this along, and I appreciate those that have endured and stayed online with us, or those that are going to be watching after the fact. Due to the time difference between Washington, D.C. and India, which is 10.5 hours, our next speaker made probably what was a quite wise decision to pre-record her material, who's going to be talking about what India has been doing to embrace the agroecological movement as part of their zero budget farming initiative, and how youth can play a vital role in advancing this movement to provide a healthy and sustainable planet for generations to come. And I could not be more moved and honored to introduce Shira Mehta, who I've had the opportunity to get to know through other previous walks of life, and whose father I had worked with when we were kind of working on some things in India and Africa together. And through that, I had the, I guess, true honor and blessing to meet his lovely wife and 2 daughters, the oldest of which is Shakira. And Shira just blew me away from the moment I met her in terms of her passion and activism and her very obtainable and bold goals to become a world leader related to efforts going on in the United Nations. And so I am going to turn this over so our team can play a pre-recorded message that she submitted for today.
Hello everyone, I'm Shriya Mehta from India and currently I'm studying in grade 12. I would like to start my speech with 2 beautiful lines. However, technology grows, earth revolves, we always stand behind agriculture. Agriculture was past, agriculture is present, and agriculture is future. This is power of agriculture. Agroecology farming that centers on food production that makes the best use of nature's goods and services by not damaging these resources. India is an agricultural land. 60% of people belong from an agricultural background. In India, there are growing number of agroecological success stories at multiple scales, each of which indicate the potential for agroecological practices to not only sustain or enhance yields, but to provide great many additional ecological and social benefits. The plant genetics play only one part in determining yields and ultimately food security. The way in which crops are grown is critical all over the world. Agroecological farming methods that nourish soil, preserve water, and minimize external inputs not only to ensure there is enough food for current population, but the land stays productive for future generation and gives fairness to all the farmers. In India, the zero budget natural farming emerged in response to growing debts among farmers and the consequent increase in farmer suicides. Through the use of as many farm resources as possible, farmers minimize the need for financial loans required for all agricultural modernization, hence the zero budget. Several thousand peasant families from India have joined the movement, moving away from monocultural cash crop to locally resourced agroecological farming methods. In India, the state of Sikkim has goal of becoming 100% organic, and Sikkim have given a very good transition and benefited over 66,000 farmers. By seeing this transition, India's Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi said, if a small state like Sikkim can do it, then why can't we dream of developing the whole Northeast as an organic state? And India is really supporting organic farming. And here comes the role of youth. All the age groups, the kids, the teenagers, middle-aged and senior citizens rely on youth and expect a lot from them. This makes the youth to be important age group in both today's world and the future generation. Therefore, due to high dependence on youth, we, the youth, have a role to play because the future of our families, communities and country is in our hands. The role of youth is simply to renew, refresh and maintain. Youth have role to renew and refresh the current status of our society, including leadership, innovations, skills and more on. On the other hand, youth have also to maintain our culture, all the good values and development projects. Today's youth is a global citizen. Even for environmental issues, youth can make huge difference by creating awareness and eco-friendly practices. Here I want to give you a very small example. The great Indian personality Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was asked that what is the culture of India? He answered, the culture of India is agriculture, but the people around us is really damaging it. So what we need to do? We can make the change. We should make the change and we will make the change. At last, I want to say I got such an amazing opportunity to work with this agroecological alliance. Thank you so much, and a special thanks to one and only Carla, who have inspired me, guided me and supported me as always. And I'm super excited to work with this alliance. Thank you so much everyone. Stay home, stay safe. Namaste, Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Shira, for that lovely message. And in fact, I think you were still awake and must be watching the live stream and tried to join in. And I'm sorry we couldn't connect you when we were already live. And so I can't wait to chat with you tomorrow and hope you're watching this from India. I could not be more proud of the commitment that someone like yourself is bringing forth in terms of embracing the importance and power and role that the youth has as part of this alliance, and I'm certain this will not be the last time we will hear from you. So thank you for that message. moving forward and staying on the international stage, who's been patiently waiting on their Friday evening. It is truly a privilege and an honor to get to introduce the next company and founding members of the World Agro Ecology Alliance, which is a company called Self Globe in Italy, who has been doing all of these things that we have been talking about since the early 90s, through the deployment of microprocessing units that they now have all over the world. And during the days of COVID and the boar story that you heard earlier that inspired us to seek Self Globe out and approach them about a partnership with Palindromes Inc. in regards to deployment of these microprocessing units in Canada and the United States to address the food supply system. And through that journey, we developed a kindred spirit and great respect and appreciation for the work that each of the companies were doing. And so there's just so much I could say about the work, but would not do it justice. And so they were kind enough to participate today in this late hour. And so I would like to introduce the CEO and founder of Self Globe, Tarcisio, and his head of sales and markets for the United States and Canada, Eduardo, who are joining us from Italy here this evening.
Thank you very much, Carla, for this opportunity. We appreciate it very much, and we are glad to be here with you. Tarcisio here want to add a very brief presentation. I will translate it for you.
Mi scuso perché non parlo bene l'inglese e ho la figura di Edoardo che traduce e presenterà la self. Prima di tutto vorrei ringraziare per l'invito a questa opportunità. Per noi è un grandissimo onore partecipare a questo movimento Alleanza e partecipare a questo evento di lancio ed è un vero piacere conoscere tutti voi, sapere che condividiamo gli stessi obiettivi e principi di visione dell'agroalimentare nel mondo.
So first of all, he's sorry that he is not able to speak English, but we thank you all for this invitation, and it's truly a honor for us to participate to this launch event and to this movement. And it is a pleasure to get to know all of you. We are sure that we share the same visions and principles of the agri-food world. So we were born as an industrial company that operated in the food sector, but our core business was the industrial slaughtering plants. An experience of more than 30 years, our CEO, Tarcisio, here, decided to found in 2014 the Self Globe, which is an innovative company in the agri-food sector with the main purpose of giving voice and strength to the small, medium-sized producers, agricultural producers around the world in the agri-food landscape. Our goal basically is to empower and support the local producers. Thanks to our technology, we are able to make them autonomous, and we are willing to provide also our know-how, and our aim is to create a global network, which we are currently doing, in which local producers can sell their own product online or internationally. Mm-hmm. We are well aware of the problems of the food system, which we consider broken right now and failed the consumers around the world. The growing population is not sustainable with the current situation in the agri-food world. We think that one way to improve the situation is to avoid waste. And I'm talking about avoiding water wasting, uncultivated lands, but most of all, avoid food wasting. But we believe that everything starts with a fair redistribution of wealth and the correct use of local resources. Local producers can produce, transform, and then resell his local product, enhancing it, and as a consequence, receiving a greater profit from the quality that he was able to achieve. What led to the creation of Self Globe was an international vision. And thanks to that vision, we were able to see that in some place around the world, there is missing even the basic food processing system and its relative infrastructures. So we have decided to solve all this by allowing small and medium-sized agricultural entrepreneurs to start transforming and processing their own products. How they can do that? Basically with our modular plants that can be placed and reused everywhere. I'm talking about industrial technology installed inside a container, a modular system. So we're able to provide modular plants that have an adequate production. And of course, they have full compliance with sanitary regulations internationally. But the self-globe model finds its maximum expression in Maya Village. Maya Village is basically a cluster of agricultural producers whose main purpose is to start production and processing system in a sustainable way. The Maya village is able to create an entire supply chain, giving the possibility to producers to become processors and sellers of their product, all with a low environmental impact. We receive a very positive feedback from governments. The social economic effect for small, medium-sized communities has been highlighted by many governments in developing countries, but not only, because behind Maya Village there is wealth redistribution, creation of jobs, and realization of an entire economic system. So we can provide the know-how, technology, and also the training to manage in the best way our modular unit. And we are doing this, we did that, and we can't wait to do that in the United States also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for both of you being here. And Tarcisio, I always say I've got to be working on my Italian as well. So I really appreciate the both of you coming here together to talk about what Self Globe is doing to truly tackle these feed the world challenges through the fair distribution and reallocation of that profit and risk along the food supply chain, and how those modular processing units are a real key to achieving success with the Ecology movement. On behalf of Palindromes Inc., we could not be more excited to be partnering with you to bring this opportunity to the United States and Canada with our first pork processing plant on a boat on its way here, and others to soon follow. And so we're so excited to start deploying this effort here and growing the platform that you've been doing around the world. I think one of the most significant things I've heard in terms of facts of what Self Globe has been doing is their currently doing work in over 46 countries and 4 continents, and have successfully deployed over 200 projects. And I think it's just amazing what this tool can be in terms of achieving this. And I could not be more honored that you have joined us as a partner in launching this alliance so that we could move forward and find other like-minded folks around the globe to really help us continue to deploy these sorts of systems. So thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I will let you guys sign off and get about your vino on a Friday night. Well, you know, I have someone else now sitting to my left that has crossed paths with Palindromes Inc. and during the months of the stay at home. This individual is straddled having family in Switzerland and in Northern California and Washington, D.C., and a home in Brooklyn and a family farm in central Missouri. And so I'm not certain exactly where he calls home. All I know is that we were lucky enough over the last many months for him to be staying at home on the family farm in central Missouri. And through a common friend and food lover in terms of health and wellness and nutrition security, thought that there was some real opportunity for some cross collaboration. And through that, we were introduced to U.S. Farms and its founder and CEO, Taylor Reed Bronson, who is here in Washington, D.C. with us right now, who's going to be speaking to you on behalf of the One Earth mentality. But through this journey, Taylor Reed really, he was actually on a separate activism and alliance journey. And I said, wait, let's form this together because there's the strength in numbers, hence the word alliance. And so for the last many months, he spent a lot of hours working with us to bring this launch to fruition and to get the nonprofit actually registered and ready to roll. And so it is just very lucky timing that we were able to cross paths when we did. He has quite a significant history in advancing policy agendas in terms of healthcare reform, indigenous tribes and rights around the world, and what that means for equitable food systems, not just here in the United States, but in many countries throughout Africa and Central and South America, and how he's bringing through U.S. Farms his holistic approach to food and agricultural production practices to light. And Palindromes Inc. has been partnering with him on how we deploy those actually on the farms and in some of the trials and demonstrations we've been doing. And so with that said, I'm going to turn the floor over to Taylor Reed Bronson.
Well, Carla, thank you so very much for having me here today. And it really is a tremendous delight to be included in this work. It's a very historic occasion that we are participating in here. So I prepared some remarks to emphasize that it is through the alliance that we can enable agroecology farmers, both present and the ones to come, who are uniquely able to make the single largest impact on the survival of humanity and our planet. Remove the legislative hindrances placed there by a powerful and influential private sector, bring opportunity to our rural communities in the form of higher farming profits and safer farming practices. Reverse the trend of failing health, resurrect an era when family farms supported American families and communities while feeding the world not just today, but more importantly, feeding the world for generations to come. Mm-hmm. It is important to remember that what has been discussed here today are not new concepts. Terms becoming increasingly popular, such as regenerative, organic, co-op, eco-agriculture, by themselves are just words. And what they represent did not just arrive in our psyche. To the contrary, they are the reason humanity has survived for countless millennia. It is through these practices, once considered the standard in farming, that America's small family farms and our rural areas flourished from the start of our nation up till a few decades ago. In the study of anthropology, agriculture is used to gain insight into ancient civilizations, a window used to determine whether a society could work alongside nature to sustain its people, with life providing nourishment, or succumb to the delicate balance of population size and available resources. This alliance provides us the opportunity to reclaim this agricultural terminology, establish their definitions, and uphold their meaning. It is in the practice they describe that we can place our focus. Representing the third generation of our family farm, these practices were intertwined in the values of our upbringing. My grandfather knew something very important, and he took care to teach it to us, that he was more than a landowner, he was a land steward. Indeed, everything on that property was dependent on him. From the trees of the forest and the animals that lived there, to the world of organisms beneath the soil, the livestock he raised and the customers who consumed it, our neighbors' health and success, the prosperity of the community where he called home, all of these things depended on my grandfather, including the most important to him, the unborn generations of our family that would inherit the stewardship of that very land. But the world we live in today is obviously different from that of my grandfather. There are more mouths to feed, a need to do more with fewer and fewer acres of farm ground. One only has to look at the difference in the combine and machinery used by our farm and the new ones being sold today. An example of the increased scale and efficiency which have dominated the developments in our agricultural industry. Indeed, these have become the drumbeat of corporate ag, that it is exclusively through their practices alone that this growing world can be fed, that profits can be made. However, the reality is quite different, recently exaggerated by a global pandemic and historic weather patterns. And through this transformation witnessed by my parents' generation, the very farming operations that supported our family for the last generations are fading into a distant memory, and many now struggle to even remember. It's a memory described to me by the agricultural mentors who have been so instrumental in guiding my steps, heroes too many to recognize here, like Carla and Russ, who are part of this work, and my grandfather I spoke of earlier, individuals representing monumental achievements yearly, worthy of anyone's admiration, a work ethic belonging to another time, a moral fortitude which drives them to undertake increasing amounts of daily effort, also they can be the best land stewards ethically possible. Even when the very markets they participate in are dwindling and plagued with daily interference from corporate ag, even when their lifetimes worth of effort and innovation is described as fairy dust and the dark ages by our very government. Still, their standards do not waver, for there has always been the choice of succumbing to the pressures of the Goliath ag industry, even as they face the loss of their homes and family legacies. And as they arrive in the autumn of their lives, they are desperate to pass the stewardship and its current relevance, this multi-generational accumulation of knowledge, onto a next generation. And while it is apparent that one lifetime isn't enough to make the impact we seek, it is also apparent that we have arrived at a critical time in the whole of human history where this very knowledge, remembered and practiced by these essential individuals, is what we need the most. So I built a business model around the following concept. If farmers were given back the choice of how to farm without massive amounts of additional effort and industry interference, they too would choose to be the kind of land stewards that my grandfather was. They would choose this because it is what makes sense over the long term, both ethically and financially. U.S. Farm has partnered with technologies in the water and farm space that represent the furthest frontier of agricultural innovation, but have been sidelined by an industry dominated by money and power. Recognizing that the advancements made by Big Ag, which have delivered higher yield and more efficient farming practices, need not be entirely eliminated, but certainly updated. That we can use the infrastructure in place without the chemical and biological components that are eliminating profits and destroying our small farms. That we can come together and heal the ecological harm they've caused. For too long, mainstream agriculture has been taking thinner and thinner slices of how to grow food and raise animals and making them into the entirety of farming. Out of the infinite ways of preparing our soil, we have spent decades primarily using 3 or 4 inputs. Out of the thousands of breeds of livestock, we have narrowed the animals we work with to a dangerous few. From the evolution of plant varieties, beginning with the dawn of our planet, they have tried to convince us their labs can engineer something better. U.S. Farm has focused on developing a holistic system of agronomics, able to eliminate chemical farming practices, increase yield, positively impact the reversal of climate change, while emphasizing ecological consideration as the paramount tenet of livestock and crop production. Through making such an impact on yield, we are allowing non-GMO and heirloom crop varieties to outperform their modified and expensive counterparts. We are creating a system where a farmer's yearly investment creates lasting perennial impact on their land and herds, not constant annual expenditure. However, the development of this platform, recognized by American scientists and researchers as the agronomics needed to turn the page on this dark era of recent American agriculture, currently has no place in the U.S. Instead, it has been received enthusiastically abroad. Our current chemical and GMO farming practices exported to these shores and borders, which have led to the same market collapse we are now experiencing domestically, are increasingly being banned and rejected. The vacuum left in their place has created a receptive audience to the market U.S. Farm represents. Massive economic opportunities in fast-growing agricultural regions currently rising to fill the global need of organic and non-GMO products. So our government shouldn't openly reject and resist such a market trend, but they are influenced and lobbied to do just that. In the process, our nation is being left behind as global markets embrace innovative farming practices and progressive agroecology principles. Our population is increasingly impacted, with over 3/4 considered obese and nearly 3/4 of our young ineligible for military service, as Carla said. And the United States food supply becomes more vulnerable with each planting season as imports increase and 30 million plus acres of farmland have become foreign owned. I emphasize again, legislatively, economically, logistically, and culturally, it is through the work of an alliance that we can create a way forward for the domestic, wide-scale implementation of these ecologically balanced farming methods. So if your views align with the values of agroecology, join with the growing nations of the world, join with the United Nations through the organization we are launching today to become a part of this movement, so that hopefully the namesake of the organization I founded can one day adopt the agricultural practices that U.S. Farm stands for. I really appreciate being here. It's a real honor.
This is why we had you close, Taylor Reed, because I don't know how anybody else would have followed that powerful, powerful declaration and statement that was so beautifully summed up. As you know, when we first met, I told you that your writing is a true inspiration, not just to myself, but to anybody whose hands it touches. And even the video that we put together was that imagery of the phoenix rising above, that we have to restart and be reborn and think about this differently, was done with our production team, who has been amazing here today, Bravo Films, the person behind the cameras who's used to once upon a time being in front of the camera and produce the videos and have taken this to a whole new level. that imagery, when we communicated about it, I said to him, the gentleman that is going to come here and close this is for him because of the inspiration, the youth, the passion, the energy that U.S. Farms and yourself personally brings to the table of what this alliance really can be about and how we work together to bring this agroecology movement developed and developing nations alike as a true solution, a holistic, encompassing solution of how we morally and ethically address the needs of our people, our plants, our animals, and most importantly, our planet for not just today, but for those generations to come. I always say, in my family, every family member has that one that feels that true connection to the land. And in my family, that was my sister. And I always think about, an old movie scene where they have that incredible just depth and connection to the land. And it always inspired me. She was an older sibling and inspired me to appreciate what that meant. And you've exhumed it in every capacity. Thank you for being here. Thank you for becoming a founding member of the Alliance along with Palindromes Inc. and Self Globe. I could not have called the action together to bring this to a close any better than what Taylor Reed did. If this is a group of principles that you stand behind, that you believe in, that you want to see how we can implement and make happen, and take what has already been successfully demonstrated in projects around the world to date through great leadership of groups such as the UN and World Health Organization and other groups that have been taking this to Africa and other parts, and how we bring the Western developed world into this movement. Any final parting words before we sign off today?
I think you said it all, Carla, and this is so much a result of your unbelievable vision and that amazing amount of work of Russ and his brother and everybody that participated today. We wouldn't be here without these unbelievable monoliths of progress in agriculture. So let's keep progressing, let's keep moving it forward.
Well, we have a very exciting rollout plan of how we're going to accomplish this and achieve this, and some fundraisers that we're getting set. We'll be reaching out to many of you that we believe and have identified as like-minded in the upcoming days and weeks. A special thanks to all of our guest speakers that have been here today to help bring this launch to fruition, and an extra special thanks to Bravo Media and Films located here in Washington, D.C. Nestor Bravo, who started that company, has been working with us for about 4 years. He identified a little over 4 years to get to this point, so I could not thank him enough for the hard work and effort he did on the back end to make this possible. We look forward to working with each and every one of you. For more information, we will invite you to visit our website at www.worldagroecologyyalliance.com, which will go live on this coming Monday. Once it goes live, you'll be able to revisit more details and the bios and backdrops of our dynamite speakers from today. And we cannot thank you enough for the time that you have spent with us on this Friday afternoon. Goodbye, be well, and happy World Food Day.
Throughout history, it's taken the most unlikely of small to think outside the square, unchained by societal norms. A phoenix rising from the sacred ashes when all seemed impossible, soaring above the haze, redefining its predecessor's reality. Defying all odds, staring down the opposition regardless of size and power, believing there's always a David within capable of defeating the Goliath. Digging deep inside with grit, an unwavering will to succeed with a bit of rebel heart and a colorful rogue spirit, putting faith over fear and living with a purpose. It is those with a renewed courage serving as a voice for the silenced with unwavering authenticity and integrity, shining its light of truth upon the wrongs that corrects the feed the world narratives. Igniting a movement across the globe, for sometimes what was once considered mighty falls. We say, why not us? Why not you? Another defining historical moment in time. How? The seed planted in our brain in the midst of the night during one of the darkest hours for humankind, that the vision came creeping. The how, the now. EMPOWERINGSMALL. Empowering. Farmers who are the proud and trusted stewards of the land. Communities who are craving local gatherings that seemed so long ago. Women who have the power to unite communities. Minorities whose perseverance have defied all obstacles. Workforce who sacrifice safety with little reward or recognition. Immigrant who for their children humbly endure what they must. And youth who understand that waiting until tomorrow is not an option. As it is the collective small that in turn empowers Mother Earth, whose cries are echoing the land, the depth of her pain, without borders, exposed through diseases and natural disasters, locust swarms, declining pollinators, poor soil productive health, shrinking land mass, knowing no difference in race, gender, religion, or nationality, no political party lines. Feel the flame. Raise your unified voices and put your hands up, for the proverbial ceiling cannot hold us believing the impossible probable. It is our moment for the small in the world to become one, truly, authentically empowered. Our actions, our future, to grow, nourish, and sustain together. World Agroecology Alliance. The movement is calling you. Now is our time. Empowering small.